Good morning, Masters. I'm Madhavi. Today we are going to start Spirit Babies book written by Walter Mackichan. In Spirit Babies, Walter Mackichan shares his clairvoyant experiences communicating with souls awaiting life on earth. He describes how spirit babies consciously guide soon to be parents on the path to conception, perceiving their future emotional and physical environments. So, this is a brief introduction. Let's start with the book. Praise for Walter Mackichan and his work. Walter Mackichan is a masterful clairvoyant, healer, and teacher. Following his advice and exercises has allowed me the ability to see the emotional patterns in my patients and help them more deeply. This was said by Doug Brazel, MD, family practitioner. Karen Stewart, COO, she says that Walter transformed my pregnancy and birth experiences into an amazing spiritual journey by helping me connect with my spirit baby. He explained our past life connections and the issues my future son would face. The meditation techniques he gave me helped me have an incredible natural birth that I will always treasure. Today, my son is a happy 1 year old, and we still use the chants and affirmations from Walter to connect and center ourselves as a family. Christine Jensen, former associate clinical professor of psychiatry, she says that Walter has been a beacon of truth for me for over 2 decades. He is accurate, authentic, and honest. He is a true gift for all those who consult him. I trust him without hesitation. Carol G. R.N. For 2 decades, I have witnessed Walter Mackichan's healing practice. His clairvoyant perspective of energetic relationships has been the opening to self healing for me and countless other individuals. Jody Bergsma, CEO of Bergsma Gallery Press. Jody says that Walter's counseling and advice transformed my life. He has the ability to completely shift people's consciousness by helping them to see beyond the veil and experience life in an eternal context. There is no one in the field of work that I regard more highly than Walter. Sherry Huber, a Zen teacher. Sherry says that Walter Mackichan is a brilliant spiritual teacher with true insight into the workings of the universe and the human spirit. His clairvoyant abilities open the door to new levels of spiritual understanding. His work is a valuable gift to anyone who wants to understand their spirituality more deeply. Leanne Morgan, former CEO. Leanne says, as a mother and business manager, Walter's insights are indispensable. He decodes the illusions, projections, and limited beliefs we place on ourselves, giving us the tools we need to live a conscious and more fulfilling life. Ain Tuberdi, MD, psychotherapist, says Walter Mackichan is a forerunner in the area of vibrational medicine. Through his unparalleled clairvoyant ability, he grounds our spiritual quest in the relationship between our own chakra system and the universal mind. He offers us the ultimate experience in self direction, the means to personally sculpt our own energy system and thereby to shape our own destiny. Rarely is healing oneself made so simple, accessible, and above all, attainable. Carolyn Milone, MA Counseling Psychology. Carolyn says, after nearly a lifetime study of psychology, learning from Walter Mackichan about how to access my energy system has brought a depth of understanding and consciousness that is at once amazing and healing. Lifelong dilemmas become clear. New decisions can be made in the context of one's greater self. Life makes more sense when you understand what your spirit had to do with it. Walter gives his clients all this and more. Acknowledgements. I would like to thank the 3 women who helped make this book a reality. My wife, Mary Francis, whose support and suggestions were indispensable to this project, my agent, Natasha Kern, and my editor, Daniel Perez, both women of exceptional intuition and insight. I would also like to thank the many friends of the Center for Self-Teaching. Your support for my work throughout the years has always touched me. Finally, I would like to thank all the mothers, fathers, and spirit babies I have worked with over the years. You have been some of my best teachers. Forward. Walter McKitchen is one of the leading spiritual teachers and healers of our time. Using his extraordinary clairvoyant abilities, he is able to give each one of us a unique place and purpose within the cosmic order. At the core of his teaching is heart consciousness, the place of non judgment, acceptance, compassion, and oneness with the world as we experience it. The practicality and simplicity of his techniques and the benefits they bring are life transforming. The information offered in this book cannot be found anywhere else and will be an amazing gift of understanding and support for all parents. Walter takes us on an amazing journey into the world of spirit babies, pregnancy, and life. As a father, I am gratified to see Walter turn his remarkable clairvoyant ability to helping people understand and make a connection with their children at or even before conception. Michael Corey, MD, Director of the Institute of Psychosocial Medicine, Dublin, Ireland. Chapter 1: A World of Visions and Voices. The Making of a Clairvoyant. Clairvoyant counselor and spiritual teacher is not your average occupation, but it's been mine for over 20 years. Because most people aren't familiar with this vocation. I am often asked how I got started, what my childhood was like, and questions like, did you always know you had healing and clairvoyant abilities? To answer some of these questions, I have put together an account of experiences that shaped my life and led me to who I am and what I do today. Childhood. Because I was raised as a Catholic, saints and angels were always very real to me. I could see them. I didn't just imagine them, I actually saw them. It never occurred to me as a child that this was unusual. I assumed everyone saw angels as clearly as I did. In church, on Sundays, when the priest talked about them, I took it for granted that everyone felt their presence in the room. I saw such beings hanging around the church ceiling. Of course, I thought everyone else saw them too. I was amazed when people didn't pay attention during Mass and talked or acted up. I could never understand why they would behave that way with these sacred figures looking down on them. I quickly learned that seeing saints and angels wasn't common for other people. Somehow, though, others seemed to recognize that I had this gift. I remember that without any soliciting on my part, other children would often come up to me and whisper in hushed tones that they had momentarily seen the Blessed Virgin. They seemed to know that I wouldn't think they were crazy. People just seemed drawn to tell me these things. I especially remember classmates telling me if they got a quick glimpse of an angel. They always shared these visions in a conspiratorial manner. They told me that they wouldn't dare tell anyone else what they had seen. I began to realize that much of what I saw all the time, most people never saw at all. I can't say that as a child, I thought my ability to see things was very important. However, when I was 10 years old, I saw something that made a big impression on me. As an altar boy, I was always fascinated by the idea that during Mass, the bread and wine were changed into Christ's actual body and blood. I wondered whether this was really true. In fact, this transubstantiation is the only thing I remember wondering about as a little child. One cold, rainy morning in March, when I was 10 years old, I had to serve at 6 a.m. Mass. I rode my bicycle through the rain around 5:30 a.m. to get to church on time. One of our priests was older, not one of the new hip priests who started showing up in the 60s. He was an old style Irish priest, very kind, gentle, and devout. When I served Mass with him, I always felt that I was at some sacred ritual. With other priests, I got the feeling they were just doing their job. On this particular morning, I wasn't paying much attention to the ongoing Mass and just automatically made my responses in Latin. But when the old priest lifted up the host to say, "Take and eat this body," a distinct warmth flooded the room. I saw a great golden cloud filling the entire church. It wasn't candle glow. It was a definite, distinct energy that poured over everything. It was focused around the old priest. and I could see that a shaft of lighting emanating from somewhere above and beyond the church was piercing the ceiling and flowing into the host, being raised into the air. The sensation that a warm, breathing human being was very near was somehow a part of this golden light. As I watched the light shining on the host, a part of me said, I should do this. I should become a priest and learn to do this. Yet, as I had this thought, a voice came out of nowhere and said, This is not for you. As soon as this voice uttered those words, I realized that I wasn't really part of the phenomenon as I was witnessing. So even though I knew I was seeing a miracle, that I was having an experience connected with what is at the core of the Catholic faith in which I then believed, I didn't feel a part of what was going on. I felt that what was happening just wasn't meant for me. This sense of being an outside observer was to become a theme in much of my spiritual life. Looking back, I don't think other 10-year-old children thought much, if at all, about such things. But after that rainy morning, I watched all the priests at every Mass to see if the light filled the church when the host was offered. It fascinated me that sometimes I saw it and sometimes there was simply nothing there. I couldn't tell whether only some priests could make it happen or whether I could perceive the golden light only at certain times. I spent many hours thinking about the golden light. To figure out the phenomenon, I began reading about the lives of saints to find out what kinds of visions they saw. Visions of golden light or of a presence that manifested itself as light seemed to occur in many of their lives. Also, because I was able to see saints and angels quite literally, I was always very interested in the novena, which is a prayer recited a certain number of times at the same time each day to solicit help from a particular saint. I grew up around people for whom saying novenas was a common practice. I would always find novena cards left in church after Mass. One of the novenas that most fascinated me was that of St. Francis. This prayer always intrigued me from the moment I first heard it. It seemed almost magical. This prayer turned out to be the catalyst for my first experience of healing the seriously ill. When I was around 11 years old, I had a parakeet that I loved very dearly. I taught him to talk and whistle, and he was my constant companion. After I'd had him for a couple of years, he became very ill, as small birds often do. I think he had some kind of respiratory ailment. At this time, taking a little bird to the veterinarian was almost unheard of. Day after day, I watched my bird get sicker, and I knew he was dying. I could feel the life force slipping out of him, and I didn't know what to do. One Sunday, after we returned from church, my parakeet was lying on his side on the bottom of the cage. My grandfather looked at it and said, The animal's dying. You might as well put it out of its misery. I ran to my room in tears. While I lay on my bed crying, the prayer to St. Francis came into my head. I began reciting the prayer, and the image of St. Francis appeared before me. When he appeared, I told him that my bird would die unless someone helped me. I remember one part of me recited the prayer over and over again, while another part of me seemed to talk with the saint. I don't remember much else other than covering my bird's cage that night and feeling sad that this might be the last time I did so. The next morning, when I woke up, I was afraid to look in the cage, but when I did, my parakeet was sitting in his perch, eating, drinking, and healthy. I believe very strongly that it was the prayers I sent out that saved him. However, I didn't feel that what had happened was a particular Catholic occurrence. Instead, I felt that my parakeet had been healed because of the personal connection I made with St. Francis. As a child, I also had the ability to tell when someone was going to die. When people in my neighborhood went to the hospital, I could always tell whether they would come back. My feelings often contradicted what the doctors said or what my parents told me. I remember that when my grandmother began going in and out of the hospital, I didn't worry until the last time she went in. The doctors told us she would be fine, but I felt that she was going to die. So the last time she was hospitalized, I told my mother that I wanted to go visit my grandmother, even though we kids weren't expected to go to the hospital because visiting the sick was considered an adult thing to do. I pestered my mother until she agreed to take me. When I was finally alone with my grandmother in her hospital room, I knew intuitively that she wanted to acknowledge that her time had come. She looked at me and said, "I'm going to go home now." I knew she meant she was going to die. I remember telling my mother about this because the doctors kept saying everything would be fine. When my mother and I were alone, I told her, "You know, Mom, I think Nana is going to die this time." My mother looked at me and said, "Yeah, I think so too." It was an interesting moment because all of a sudden, the facade of everything's going to be fine slipped away. This was one of those rare childhood moments when I felt that someone was actually willing to acknowledge to me the truth of a situation. One problem I had as a clairvoyant child was that what I perceived was often very different from what I was told. This was especially true when people told me they weren't angry. No matter what people said, if they were angry, their agitation was obvious to me because I could literally see a fiery red, intense energy encircling their heads like a storm. So while an individual vehemently denied his anger, I watched a red storm swirl around him. As a child, this taught me that while one type of reality was public and had to be accepted, another private reality existed that was often very different. When my mother shared with me the knowledge that my grandmother was going to die, it was one of the few times I could feel the gap between the two realities disappear. In that moment, we were not separated by the illusions of the physical world. Moments like that from my childhood really stick out in my mind. I also had the ability to do hands on healing work. Looking back on it now makes me laugh. When my younger sister had a headache, I would put my hands on top of her head to make it go away. We didn't think anything of it. If she had a headache, she came to me and I relieved it through the touch of my hand. I remember my mother seeing us and asking what we were doing. When I told her, she didn't believe me until my sister said it was true. College, graduate school, and beyond. My freshman year of college was so difficult that I wondered if I should continue college at all. One day at the end of my freshman year, my Ukrainian grandparents, who had both passed away, appeared to me while I was writing a paper. They told me that everything was going to be all right and that I should continue with school. They also said that they would help me get through the difficult times. From then on, I no longer felt so alone or isolated at college, and my grades improved. My circle of friends began to expand as well. This was a fascinating period because every once in a while, when I was having trouble, my grandparents appeared and told me to keep pushing forward and I would succeed. Their appearances boosted my morale and left me feeling that I could work harder, which was interesting in that they both had worked very hard in their own lives. Hard work was part of their nature. Their presence during my college years seemed to transfer that ethic to me. When it was time to apply to graduate school, most of my professors thought that Stanford or Yale would be the best fit for me. I also decided to apply to the University of California at Berkeley. I don't know why I applied there. I wasn't attracted to any of the social movements occurring on campuses in the 60s. I ended up completing my Berkeley application at the last minute, but in only 2 days, I managed to fill out my application, write my essay, and get letters of recommendation. Even a professor from whom I had been trying for 3 months to get a letter of recommendation contributed to my Berkeley application. It was odd because, although I could never seem to get hold of him, the day I realized I had to finish my application, I ran into him in a stairwell. I was nervous about asking for a letter because he was a big shot professor, but he agreed to write a letter right away. In the end, I got accepted by the school I had put the least amount of effort into getting into, even though Berkeley accepted only 30 or so students out of the 400 who applied. The schools for which my professors thought I'd be so right both rejected me. So all of a sudden, I was leaving Philadelphia and heading off to Berkeley, California. In fact, from that point onward, my life took directions I could never have anticipated. I didn't give much thought to spirituality or healing work until my first year as a teaching assistant at Berkeley. That year, I had a horrible kidney stone attack. I remember writhing in pain and being taken to the hospital. I was shot full of pain medication, but the stone wouldn't pass. The pain came back every hour for days on end. Then, out of nowhere, one of the graduate English department secretaries came to see me. I didn't know her very well, but she said to me, "You might not think this is something you want to do, but I work with a group that does hands on healing work. When I heard you were sick, I thought you might be open to this." I was in so much pain, I said, "Sure, go ahead." She placed her hands on my stomach, and a warm feeling emanated from them. The golden energy I had seen as a child started to appear, but then quickly disappeared. She said, "I'm sorry. I guess it didn't work." I told her that it was okay, and I really appreciated her trying. When she left, the pain returned again and was horrible. What's worse, the nurse refused to give me any more pain medication because I had already been given my limit. The pain grew worse. Suddenly, what seemed like a crazy idea popped into my head. I got the notion that I could send a golden light down from my sixth chakra in the center of my forehead to the pain and then move the pain from the right side of my kidneys into my navel and pull it out. When I visualized pulling the pain out of my navel, it literally disappeared. My body immediately relaxed. In fact, I felt more relaxed than when I had been given shots of Demerol. As soon as I performed this energy work on myself, I called the nurse and said, "The pain's over. I want to go home." She didn't believe me, and I was forced to stay in the hospital for another day until the medical staff confirmed for themselves that my pain was gone. When I went back to school, I told the story to the graduate secretary, who in turn told me that she thought I must have a special talent for healing work. I was intrigued by the idea, and so I found a place in Berkeley that offered classes in meditation and healing. At this point, I still had no intention of pursuing healing as a career. I just wanted to learn how to make pain go away so I wouldn't have to take aspirin or other medications. I remembered having relieved my sister's headaches and thought that healing would be a good ability to cultivate. As I learned to meditate, I gradually became aware of all the different and subtle energies that exist around us. I was also intrigued to discover that the meditation school offered clairvoyance classes and teachings. Classes took place in one room and readings in another. One day, I arrived early for a meditation class and saw that someone in the neighboring room was giving a reading. I listened to what this person was saying and thought to myself, "That's not true. The person doing the reading is really wrong." When the reading ended, I heard the recipient tell the reader, "Nothing you said struck me as true at all." Later, I spoke with my teacher about the experience. He asked me what I saw when I looked at him. I described a few things and then he said, "Well, what you're describing is what people do when they read someone." After this, I decided to take classes designed to open your clairvoyance. In these classes, I learned about different energy channels, including chakras and auras, and their various colors. But as I took classes, something odd became apparent. I felt that no one was saying anything new to me or telling me something I didn't already know. The classes just confirmed what I already saw all the time. For instance, I always saw light around people, so I didn't understand why it was a big deal to see an aura for the first time. I realized that a lot of what amazed other people I took for granted as part of daily life. During this time, I lived over a rock shop of University Avenue in Berkeley and was preparing to take the oral exam for my PhD in English. I had already written a preliminary paper, which was the beginning of my doctoral thesis. I had also lined up a panel of professors for my orals and was studying hard to get ready. One day at around 5 p.m., as I passed the door of the rock shop, I noticed a man I had seen for years walking around Berkeley. He always dressed in white, and from conversations I had heard in passing, I believed he was a follower of Islam. He carried a big walking stick and was dressed in distinct vestments. Whenever I saw him, he had a very sore look on his face and never smiled at all. I wouldn't have noticed him as I walked by that day, except that somehow his eyes stood out. I turned and looked directly into them. He looked at me and said, "Allah." Normally, I would have just walked on. There are a lot of crazy people on the streets of Berkeley. But for some reason, I said to him, "You are a very beautiful man. God bless you." At that moment, the most beatific smile I had ever seen spread across his face. He put his hands together and pointed upward. I took his gesture to mean that we all belong to God or something of that nature. I remember thinking that something odd was going on and that maybe there was more to this pointing upward than I could figure out at that moment. As I climbed the stairs to my apartment, I realized he had been pointing specifically to my room, and I thought that was very odd. As I entered my apartment, a shimmering white energy image of the same man appeared. Today, you would say he looked like a hologram. He said, I'm here to tell you that you are not going to take your oral examination in English. Instead, you are going to take what you are learning about clairvoyance and healing and do work for other people. I was in shock. I said, I've been studying for this exam for 2 years. I have been in graduate school for 5 years. I'm not going to pick up the phone and cancel my oral exams. If you want, after I take them, we can talk again. As this conversation took place, a part of me was thinking how strange it was to be conversing with this shimmering figure. But the entity just shook his head and said, You will not take the exams. One of the professors will have to go to the hospital. The exam will be cancelled and you will have to reschedule. That is how you will know. Since everyone on my exam panel was in good health, it didn't make sense that any of them would suddenly fall ill. So I said, When that happens, then I'll believe it. The entity replied, Well, as they say, blessed are those who have not seen and still believe. I said something like, Yeah, sure. Then the entity said, Actually, my real reason for being here is that Christ wants to talk to you. Then the white figure was replaced by a figure all in gold. It had no face. It was just a floating, shimmering gold energy. I thought to myself, Wow, am I supposed to follow the pathway of Jesus? This golden entity said, Remember as a child when you were on the altar and we told you that wasn't for you? You are going to work with the idea of people finding their own spirituality inside. You will establish a way to teach people about themselves. Okay, masters, we'll stop here. Thank you.